Hey everybody, Tom Henderson, the founder of RESGEN here, and I want to welcome you to the very first episode of Season 3 of the RESGEN Giving Life Podcast, where we hear stories and have conversations about life in Christ, everyday discipleship, and exploring ways that we as men can give life to others. I'm super excited about today's show because we are kicking off this new season with a friend of mine who just this past spring was elected to his second term as mayor right here in my home city of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Paul TenHaken is a husband, a father, a devoted follower of Christ, and an entrepreneur who, after starting and running a successful marketing company for 10 years, threw his hat in the political arena. And it's a hat that he has worn very well. In fact, under his leadership, Sioux Falls was named one of the best-run cities in the country for 2021 and has also achieved many accolades for its fiscal responsibility and its lowest debt per capita in over a decade. On today's podcast, Mayor TenHaken and I discuss how his personal faith journey and how his faith influences his leadership, both at work and at home. We also discuss the biggest lessons that he learned while leading the city through a pandemic, how he handles knowing that no matter what decision he makes, he will always be disappointing a certain percentage of the population, and whether or not his stint as the Sioux Falls Skyforce Mascot way back in the day really was the perfect bridge to becoming mayor. This is going to be a fun episode, and I can't think of a better way to kick off Season 3. Here's my conversation with Mayor Paul TenHaken. Mayor Paul TenHaken. Brother, you made it. You're at the
I made it. I can die a happy man. Yeah. Pinnacle of my career. I'm on the RESGEN podcast. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for the invite. I'm glad we finally made this happen, man.
Yeah, dude. And it is. You're the inaugural episode of Season 3. So we're gonna have a good time today. Okay.
I love it.
And I know that as we get going, there's going to be a lot of listeners that already know you. Okay, those that maybe are from the Sioux Falls area, but we do have a lot of listeners that are outside of Sioux Falls.
Yeah.
That they don't know much about you at all. So just do a quick little intro of who you are. We're going to get into kind of the nitty gritty of some different parts of your life and what you're doing now, leadership and all those kinds of things. But just give a little intro, you, your family, work, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So Paul TenHaken, 32nd mayor of the great city of Sioux Falls, man. Grew up in Minnesota, Worthington, Minnesota. Went to college at Dordt College in Sioux Center, Iowa. Yep. Go defend Dordt University. Sorry, they changed to be in Dordt University now. Graduated there in 2000 as a colorblind graphic design major. So that didn't work real well. So, yeah. But, you know, that was right when the web was taking off. The internet was new. So I went to college to really be a web designer.
Okay.
And graduated from there. And I did that. We moved to Sioux Falls in 2000. I did that. I married my wife after my junior year.
Met her at
Jill.
Dordt.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we'll be married 23 years, moved to Sioux Falls, and we were just newlyweds. And I got into the web design world, loved it. Did that for several years and realized, man, I don't know if I'm really cut out to sit behind a computer all day. I like people. I like talking. I like interacting with people. I'm a little more of a type A extrovert, and building websites was fun, but it wasn't going to be my career. So I went back to school at USF, got some undergrad courses I needed, got an MBA. And then in 2008, I started a business called ClickRain. In 2008, Obama had just won the White House. And he had used digital marketing and digital technology like no politician had ever done. He was using, the social media thing and in MySpace, and Twitter was brand new, and Facebook wasn't even a thing yet. And he was using A/B testing. And I saw that happen, and I'm like, you know what? I think there's going to be a place for a company that specializes in social media, because I think this could be a thing. And it became a thing. Yeah. So I started this company, did that until 2018, 10 years, and exited the company, and we'll get into this, exited the company to run for office. That's a whole long story of why the heck I would do that. And so fast forward to today, I have 3 kids now that were birthed during this process.
Yeah.
I got a 16-year-old daughter, Jade, a 13-year-old son, Max, a 9-year-old daughter, Nora. Been the mayor for 4.5 years, and still trying to figure out how I got to this point doing this.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of directions that we're going to go today and try to cover a lot of ground in a short amount of time. But I do want to ask, just even the launch of ClickRain, because at that time there wasn't a lot of companies that were doing that. In Sioux Falls for sure, and there's probably others maybe in larger cities and that kind of thing. I think there's a lot of people that would say they want to start a company, that they have ideas, they have a desire, but there's a struggle of confidence. There's there's a fear of, will this work out? I remember when I launched RESGEN in 2010, my kids were 6 and 3, and I'm like, I don't know if this is going to work, but it was so clear that that's what God wanted me to do. So what was it for you that said, I think that we can launch this thing called ClickRain and it just might work? I mean, was there some fear? I imagine there was.
It was total fear. Part of the story for me was I had 4 partners. So there's 5 of us. We each put in $5,000. A lot of people don't know this.
Okay.
I mean, this is a kind of an unheard part of my company's history. There's 5 of us. So we started this company with $25,000, which at the time to me was like an ungodly amount of money, like $25,000. I mean, incredible. Of course we're going to do this. Fast forward, I ended up buying those 4 out about 1.5 years later. But that helped me because it's like, okay, I had other people believing in me, putting some money behind me. That was a little bit of a push I needed, to get the company started. I think the other thing I do a lot, and I know this maybe sounds pessimistic, but I'm like, what's the worst case scenario? Worst case scenario, you start a business, you put some capital into it, it fails tremendously. You got 6 months, a year, 2 years of incredible real world experiences, life lessons that you can take to another gig, take to another company. That shines way more on a resume to me than, working as a mortgage broker, for a bank or, something like that. So
Sure.
I was like, honey, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it. And I could totally fail. And are you cool if we fail? I mean, we may have to move to an apartment because we're going to, second mortgage our house for some stuff we need. And she's like, yeah, do it. So that's what we did.
Yeah.
And God blessed it. So I think a lot of times people give entrepreneurs too much credit. They're like, well, you must just have been really a savant and really visionary. It's like some people just get dumb lucky. In fact, I would say 90% of entrepreneurship is just dumb luck, right place, right time, right relationships, and things just come together.
Yeah. So if someone is, let's say they're in this space right now where they're saying, man, I really want to do this. Like you hear it said, like, man, find something you're passionate about and then just pursue that. Or, find something you love to do and you'll never work a day in your life, which, okay, we know that's
not true.
That's not true.
Lie. Big lie.
But so let's just say someone they've got these ideas, but are there things that you could encourage them with right now of like, man, how do I know if I should do it? I shouldn't do it. Do I have to have partners?
Well, the first thing you always have to do, at least for me, is you gotta blanket it with prayer and with scripture and determine, is this God's will?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times in business and in life, we do, man, this feels good. Find a job you love and you'll never work a day. Do I love being the mayor? No, I would not say I love it. And don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean I hate it, but It's very hard and it's very challenging. And there's days I just want to be done. But it's also, I believe, a calling to do this work. So I think when you say, well, I just want to do something I love, well, sometimes we have to do hard stuff. And sometimes you may be called to start a company that you don't really want to, but the world needs it, your community needs it, whatnot. So you got to shower it with prayer, I think, is first and foremost. Second thing I'll say is it's just like having a family or deciding when you want to get married. When's the right time to have a baby?
Yeah.
There's never like, all right, it's going to be in December of 28. It's never the right time. You just at some point have to say, honey, let's go. It's time to start a family.
Yeah.
And same with entrepreneurship. You have to just say at some point, you know what? We're going to try it. We're going to go. And the family may work out. The business may work out. It may not. But it never gets easier the further you go in life to start something like, a business or I think the earlier you can kind of scratch that itch, and I shouldn't say that completely, but the earlier you can get familiar with what it takes to start a business, start a company, those are lessons you really use throughout your career, whether you stay with that business or not.
One of the things that you said, I think that was in your case, was that you had 4 other people that you were true partners in the business and getting it launched, which, brings challenge. There's a lot of good things, but there's also challenges as you try to figure out how to work together with everybody in the same vision and work towards the same goals. But I think what that helped create for you, though, was community, that you weren't doing it alone. And I know that for me, I didn't have other people that were like on staff and saying, hey, we're going to make this happen. Obviously, I had Laura, much like you had Jill, and saying, yeah, let's, in fact, if Jill was anything like Laura, when I told her, she's like, finally you're getting beyond your fear and just stepping out and doing this thing.
Yes.
But what I did have was a group of individuals that were encouragement, that were discernment, that I could bounce off those ideas and say, yeah, can I do this? Do you think this is what God's calling me to do? And so I think that that's such an important word, that even if you don't have those partners, like as far as a business venture, who is in your corner? Who do you have that can give wisdom and discernment as you try to move forward in that? Yeah,
for sure. And one of my favorite adages is the easiest ship to sink is a partnership, and partnerships can be very messy, can be very difficult. My partnership with my partners, it ended amicably, but it ended obviously. So it was, we had different ideas, different vision. But I tell you, man, when there's people in your corner, you get an extra shot of courage and stick-to-itiveness that you wouldn't have when you're all alone. That's why I'm a big believer in entrepreneurial incubators and, an entrepreneurial ecosystem like we're building in Sioux Falls, because that encouragement support system is very, very valuable in having a business succeed.
So let's transition now into the decision to, after 10 years, you were labeled and you were given the award of like Entrepreneur of the Year. You had received some awards and accolades, which, then when you sell your business, you're kind of walking away from all of that and now walking into new terrain, a political world of which, you said, boy, I'm not sure I like the political world. It's a pretty charged world.
I don't like it. I'll just go on record.
And you would say that, and I remember from the very first time that we talked about it, and I heard you speak about it, it's like, and I'm not a politician, but I have to guess that what gave you the courage again to step into that world and into this new world of, maybe God is calling me to be mayor is, yes, your family. But again, you had this community, these people around you that said, Paul, I think you can do it.
Yeah. It's a crazy deal, Tom, how I got into this world of politics. And if you would have told me, man, even 7 years ago, like I said, been a little 4 years that I've been mayor, 7 years ago, hey, Paul, you're going to do this, would have laughed you out of the room. I'm like, no way. But as I got further into my business, maybe 7, 8 years into it, I found that the allure of success was not as exciting as I thought it would be. So whether that be monetarily, whether that be schedule-wise, flexibility, at some point you just come face to face with your own mortality and say, okay, when I leave this earth, what's my legacy? Was my legacy that I was a good entrepreneur, and I built a company and I made good money? Because there's a ton of those. And that's a very hollow existence. So if I was to die today and you came and eulogized me, or you came to my, viewing and you stood over my casket, would you say, man, that Paul, what a good business guy he was? And I'm like, wow, that would be a very hollow existence. And that just tugged on me. Like, why am I here? Why did God put me on this earth? And I don't think it's to be an entrepreneur. And despite it going well in my business, I felt it was becoming an idol. I was becoming identified as the CEO, entrepreneur of this company. And I'm like, I don't want that to be my existence. So I started just opening up my hands and my heart and my mind to God. Say, what do you want from me? Like, what am I supposed to be doing here? And this running for office thing kept coming up. People would ask me about it. Have you ever thought about this? I won't get into all the details, but there's just these signs and signals. And I was like Jonah running from this, man, absolutely running from having to do this. And, eventually decided, hey, I'm going to run for mayor of Sioux Falls. I'm going to unwind myself from my business. I'm going to sell it. I'm going to be totally done. I'm going to run for mayor. I'm probably going to lose because there were some really great people running who had backgrounds in public service. And then I'll do whatever God wants me to do after that. But I have to be loyal to this call to run. I don't think he's calling me to win, but he is calling me to run. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it with integrity. I'm going to lose, and I'm going to go do what's next. So ran, didn't lose, and here we are. So, and I say that not like, sometimes I joke, maybe that's how Trump felt too. He's like, oh, I won. Now what? Now I have to lead? But I really just got cast into this then with no background in public service. And I see Sioux Falls, not that I'm on this crusade, but I always see this community, man, this is my mission field that God has called me to serve and serve people with love in a way that everyone feels welcome, everyone feels cared about, everyone feels seen and noticed here. No one feels discriminated against, and so it's an incredibly big honor, but it's a lot of responsibility. I mean, it gets a little heavy, at times. But looking back, I wouldn't change this course for all the money in the world.
Yeah. So I want to get into some specifics that you've had to kind of lead through in your first term and now as you are in your second term. But prior to that, I do have a very serious question to ask you, and that is, what role do you think that being the mascot of the Sioux Falls Skyforce played? Was that the perfect bridge to becoming the mayor, or was what role did that play?
Well, I'm really glad Katie Kirk's asking the hard questions over here. It's hard hit. Yes, I was a mascot. We all have our dark moments in our careers. Honestly, we've been really connected with our semi-pro basketball team. My wife was a cheerleader for many years.
Sky leader, I
believe
is
the term.
What
she loves it when I bring that up too. Yeah. So I was a mascot for a couple seasons, and it made me realize what I didn't want to do for life, which is have a stinky head on for 4 hours a night. But yeah.
Oh, that's good. Do they fumigate that after each game?
You just Febreze the heck out of it, man. It smells like a high school dance with all the smells in there that you're axing and Febrezing and trying to get the stench out.
Oh, that's so good. Okay, so let's get back now into the real stuff. Although I think that is some hard-hitting news, so I appreciate that. I've been called Katie Kirk, at this table before, so I appreciate that. All right, so right out of the box, you're elected mayor, and even during that, by the way, for those that don't know, there was some kind of difficulty even in the that election process, and it went to a runoff election, and there was some questions of character that were brought up, and scenarios where you really kind of had to choose the integrity.
Bingo.
That you said, am I going to live by this integrity, or am I going to get into more of this kind of, I hate the word mudslinging, but that's kind of what politics sometimes becomes. Yeah. So even during that process of just having to say, no, I'm going to continue to campaign above board, be filled with character and integrity to the highest level that I can. What did you learn through that process prior to even entering the office? PTSD,
even like thinking about it. But, a lot of people don't even know that, when I first ran for office in 2018, I got deposed by the DCI, by the sheriff's office, because allegations were made about me as a person, and they weren't true. But going through, the tape recorder on the table, sitting across from a DCI agent, I mean, it's like, your palms are getting a little wet. And at that time, it's one of the lowest points in my life, because I'm asking God, I'm like, why did you call me to do this? Like, what am I doing right now? I left an incredible company, an incredible life, great income, flexibility. I'm sitting here getting deposed to be a mayor? Like, this is bonkers. And I think what I learned from that is that gave my skin an incredible layer of thickness I didn't have before. And it was almost preparing me for how thick the skin has had to be the last couple of years. Because the last couple of years, oddly enough, was just talking with my brother on my drive here today to record this, about how incredibly tense the last 2.5 years has been in this country, and how we've had to just get so tough because of what social media has done, and the political climate, and COVID, and George Floyd, and now Roe v. Wade, and just there's so much anger in our country. And who are people typically angry at? Elected officials. We're the reason everything's crappy. Inflation is elected officials, or Supreme Court is because elected officials put them. So going through that crap, during my first election at the time, lowest point in my life, with the benefit of hindsight, and this is how God always works, man, is you're like, God, now I see why he did that and why he took me through that dark time, because there's not much that bothers me anymore, and my skin is just like a Goodyear tire, man, and stuff just bounces off, and you can't stick anything in me anymore, because I went through some real crap, and I'm thankful for that, actually.
And that doesn't make it any less painful, but it causes you to think about, okay, I see God's purpose in that pain.
Yes.
Where, like you said, in that hindsight, but that doesn't mean that if you're in a spot like that right now, and there is great pain, that it's good. A good process, because it's hard to see what is beyond that. But to identify, man, this really does suck. This really does. But then how are you going? What are you going to do with that?
Exactly.
Are you going to lean into your faith? Are you going to lean into those that know you, that love you? And, in your case, of course, it was, you knew that the integrity was there. So it was interesting that you mentioned that, just when you sit across in that situation, you know that you didn't have anything to worry about, because you knew that it was not true. Right. But yet, when we've all seen the shows, the lights on you, you're sitting in the table.
Totally.
It's stressful.
Spotlight on you. There's, one pencil by you, and they're asking you questions, and I'm like, what is happening right now? I'm waiting for your older audience remembered, candid camera guy jumping out and like, is this real right now? So anyway, I think whenever we go through those valleys in life, and everybody has them, in their lives, at the time, they just make no sense, and you question God, and you question his plan, and you question a lot of things. And then the further you get from those deep moments, you say, okay, now I see how this was used for myself, for his glory, to better me as a man, a person, a husband, whatever. Sometimes you have to look really hard, but you can always see, it's like, okay, I see the plan here. And I think that's what we don't have as a race oftentimes, is patience. We want to know, why did God give my grandpa cancer? Why did my wife, commit suicide? Why is this happening? We want to know in the moment. And then the further we get from it, sometimes we can say, okay, because that happened, it led me to this, and it allowed me to meet this person. And he used that. He used that for the kingdom and for his glory. And I think that's what we should never try and discount or lose sight of.
One of my favorite scriptures that I just think speaks to God's presence specifically during those difficult times is in the book of Isaiah, where it says that when you go through the fire, you will not be burned. When you're in the flood, the waves will not sweep over you. For I am the Lord your God, and I am with you. Are there scriptures, Paul, that you've said, boy, you know what? These are ones that I've kind of, or one specifically that this is one that I've kind of clung to. That's been something that's been really meaningful to me during different seasons.
I'm going to share with you a quick story. And the story of Jonah in the Bible is just very special to me, because when I was running for office, I ran from doing this initially. I didn't want to do it. I'm like, God, why would anyone want to get into politics? You got the wrong guy. Jonah's story is, you got the wrong guy. Yeah. I'm going to try and outrun you. We know what happened. God, had him get swallowed by a whale. He gets spit up on land. And so while I was running for office, my pastor did a series on Jonah. And the last verse of Jonah, the very last verse, says, and why would I not also care for Nineveh, a land of 120,000 people and also many animals? And I'm like, okay, so God was saying to Jonah, you got to go to Nineveh. There's 120,000 people to care for. And I reached out to the city clerk the next day. I'm like, how many registered voters are there in the city of Sioux Falls? And he's like, it's like 118,900, and like 120,000 people. It's a very specific number.
Yeah.
And it just jumped out at me like, man, maybe I'm being called to serve the people of Sioux Falls just like Jonah was. It was just one of those moments that I'm like, this number is just too specific, and the number of people in Sioux Falls is too specific. So I look back on that. It was a sign of God saying, hey, you're on the right track. Just stick with it. I know it sucks right now. And I know you're getting beat up, but that doesn't mean it's not your calling. It doesn't mean it's supposed to be easy. So that one, the story of Jonah, and specifically that last verse, is one I kind of look at as providential and hearken back to quite a bit.
Yeah, and that's one of those marker events. So sometimes when you have those days of like, what the world am I doing? It's like, okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at that again as just that reminder of saying, nope, this is what God has for you. So, and I know that your faith is so important to you, and it's something that is important to not just you, but your family. And one of the things that I think that sometimes it's difficult for business leaders to do, elected city officials to do, is to kind of share their faith or say, hey, my faith is my foundation even, or whatever, for fear of what is going to be the backlash of that or the response of other people. But I've seen you become more and more open, even more so, not that you weren't open before, but I've even seen you become more and more open about really showing your passion for your faith in your position. As mayor, how has your faith just kind of even matured more and more to where you feel like, no, this is something that I not only can do, but that I should do in the role that I have?
Well, and I probably should have said this when we opened our conversation, is I'm on your podcast as Paul TenHaken. My job is mayor.
Yeah.
My views don't represent the city of Sioux Falls. And just because you get an elected office doesn't mean you whitewash your beliefs and you have to believe everything and celebrate everything. It's like, I still have things I believe in. And I ran on a platform of being open about my faith. So if people didn't like it, they knew who I was and they wouldn't have elected me. Well, they did. So it tells me, okay, people are okay with this. But I'll tell you, something I think about a lot is, when we all meet our Maker, and we're going to someday, I don't think it would be an acceptable excuse for me to say to God, hey, you understand I was in politics, right? So I kind of had to just be a little milquetoast on everything, and you get it. You know, in this environment, God, you get it. It's polarized. Like, you think you'd say, yeah, I get it. You get a hall pass, you go around the velvet rope over there. Yeah. No. I mean, like, you were given a platform to shine and share the love of Christ and try and model godly leadership. I screw up all the time on it, and I'm always trying to figure out how I can do it better, but I also just feel that that's a responsibility and trust to all of us in our positions. That how do we, we always talk about the term, how do you take Sunday into Monday? Too often, like, our faith, it starts and stops on Sunday. And, Sunday is just a way to recharge the batteries for the week. And that's when church really starts. I mean, church starts on Monday. And how you live, how you drive in traffic. I mean, all these things is all part of your faith and how people see you as a man or woman of God.
Yeah. And so that doesn't mean that a lot of times I think, well, if I'm being a person of faith, that means I have to be preaching or I have to always be sharing my testimony or whatever. That's not the case. It's yes, that doesn't mean that when there's opportunities, we do that 100%. And because words are necessary, we're going to use them. But if it's all it is words and it's not modeled, and so it's how do we do that on the regular? So if you're a business leader out there and I'm a Christian business leader, it really begins with how do you treat people?
Yeah.
How do you care for them? How do you care for? I know that's been a big thing of just your life is how do we appreciate all of our city workers,
right?
From the highest office to those that are overlooked, but they're still like whether they're in the Parks and Rec department or roads or whatever, right? I mean, like whatever the case may be, how do we care for our city employees?
Totally. I'll give you a real example, and this is not intended to be a back patting thing or anything, but there's a lot of people don't know this, but tomorrow night, and we're going out to the jail. I say we, me and one other person, and I'm going to meet with the lifers group out at the state pen. And it's exactly what it sounds like. Yeah. These are men in prison for life without the possibility of parole. And They are so jacked that I'm coming out there to talk with them. And can those guys, whoops, hit your mic there. Can those guys do a single thing for me? No. Can they vote?
Nope.
Okay. Can they give me any money? Can they volunteer in the city? Can they do anything for me? No, they can't. But are they still children of God? And do they still need to know that they're loved? And have they committed some heinous crimes? Absolutely. But is God's forgiveness still open to them like it is all of us? Absolutely.
Amen.
And so I think we need more people to step up and see the marginalized people in our community to say, hey, how am I reaching out and serving someone who maybe never is seen or is never noticed? There's a guy down the hall from you named Rob Lone, and Rob Lone runs Vantage Point 3. Mm-hmm. For your listeners, his partner for many years was a guy named Randy Reese.
Yep, love him.
And Randy Reese would always encourage me, and he was an incredible mentor to me, to become a world-class people noticer. And he would talk about that. He's like, how are you becoming a world-class people noticer? And what he meant by that is Randy could walk into a room and could notice the one person that something's off with them. And he would get to him, and he would figure out, and he'd poke and ask the right question. You know how he'd ask those prodding questions. We lost him way too early, but he was an incredible guy. And I think we need more world-class people noticers to say, I want to notice this person, not just notice them, I want to invest in them, I want to care for them, I want to love on them, and they can do nothing for me in return. And that's what Scripture calls us to do. The poor, the orphans, the widows, the outcast.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's such a good reminder, because let's be honest. I mean, we live in a world where we walk into a room and we immediately assess, okay, who should I go and get in conversation with so that I can be seen as this, or that can get me to this level or get this deal or whatever. When was the last time that we walked into a room and said, who's maybe standing alone? Who's feeling lonely? It's kind of like going in the lunchroom, right? Remember when we were middle school and in high school, and I always used to tell my boys, who are now, 21 and 18 for crying out loud, but about saying, man, find those kids in the lunchroom, which I know is hard to do, but find those kids in the lunchroom that are sitting alone and go and befriend that kid, because that, you never know, that could save that kid's life even.
Totally.
And so think if we took that as citizens of our cities, wherever we're at, when we walk into whatever function we're going to, or even the grocery store. What about the clerk that's checking our groceries out?
Dude, that's the type of stuff that excites me about my job in this role, is that economic development will happen. The street out here is going to get paved no matter who's in that office. I mean, we got a great team that assesses all this stuff, but the soft things like caring for people, investing in people, and mentoring and mental health, and reaching out to people that are on the brink, those are really special things that I think we got to not lose sight of when we're talking about running a city, running a community, running a business. We get so focused on the bottom line, the P&L, and the economic development, all these different things. But we are all, when it comes down to it, in the people business. We care for people, whether you're a mayor, whether you're running a nonprofit or running a business. None of it happens without the people who are delivering those services to your employees, customers, the community.
Yeah. So you have had the privilege, I'll say it that way, the privilege of leading our community through some tornadoes, through some flooding, through some rioting that took place, and there's been a pandemic that people may have heard about that you've been able to kind of lead through. And no shortage of polarizing topics, like you already mentioned. What have you learned, Paul, about leadership through all of this that maybe has been, that you didn't know before, or that has been maybe taken to another level?
Man, great question, because there's been so much. And one of the most cliche things about leadership, but it's very, very true, is you have to stack your deck with an incredible team and then let that team perform. And so when there are tornadoes or flooding in our city, we have such an incredible emergency operations center team that they know what to do and they get out and do it, and I stay out of their way. I mean, they come to me when there's a question or two, or it's like, hey, Mayor, what's your call on this? Are we going to pick up the trees or not, or on the boulevards, and what do you want to do? But after that, you just let them lead. And man, I still see a lot of people who just can't get out of their own way in leadership. You know, they want to be the man or the woman. They want to take the credit, and you have to deflect praise and accept the blame. And I think that's still a concept a lot of people struggle with. And I think the other thing I've learned, though, is you have to get comfortable with taking criticism. I mean, criticism, it goes hand in glove with leadership. And in today's digitally connected age, you cannot do anything without getting criticized for any decision. I mean, I could invite the Pope to come to Sioux Falls today, and people would be mad that the streets are blocked because the Pope is, I mean, you get criticized for everything. And you have to just accept the fact that with leadership comes criticism. You have to be open to learning from that and realizing that you don't have all the answers. There were times, especially during the pandemic, when I shifted courses on some of my own decision making. Because as I got more information, I'm like, you know what? I was wrong on that.
Sure.
And, you know, whether it was masking or mask mandates, stay-at-home orders. I know it's so weird to even say those terms, but you got to remember when COVID hit in March of 2020, I mean, we had estimates of there could be up to 30 to 50,000 South Dakotans dead from this.
Yeah.
Holy smokes. When you're presented with that level of data, you are ready to push the nuclear button like, this is on me to help prevent this many deaths.
Yeah.
Now, with the benefit of hindsight, we're like, well, that obviously didn't happen.
Yeah.
We realized cloth masks didn't even do anything.
Right.
But it was a tense time. And so learned a lot about myself, criticism, and then the ability and the need to shift directions. And I think that's another thing a lot of leaders will often do is they make a position, they stick with that position because they don't want to eat crow, they don't want to look like they were wrong. And we need more people to say, you know what, I was wrong on this.
Yes.
I was wrong in this, and it's my bad. I'm fallible. I got more information from my team, and I'm going to pivot and go a different direction. And if you want to call me a flip-flopper, call me whatever you want. It's just as the information changed, so does my mind.
Yeah. And that's not only, I think, a great leadership and business principle, that's a great parenting principle.
Yes.
Bingo. Because when we have those kinds of conversations with our kids of saying, you know what, Dad was wrong on that. And I'm sorry, or we're gonna adjust this now because I was inaccurate. I was given some different information, or man, I reacted emotionally out of this in this situation. We have such strong leadership, more so in those situations where we show humility and apologize, or an ability to shift, than if we just dig our feet in the sand and say, nope, I can't let them know that I'm wrong.
And that's the concept of coachability. And people often ask me, hey, what do you look for in employees and leaders and people in your team? And like, number one is they need to be coachable. And coachable means I need to be able to take advice and shift my direction and make different conclusions based on what my coach is telling me, based on what my boss is telling me, my wife is, my kids are telling me. And if you are not coachable and are rigid and inflexible, I tell you, you are not going to be very fun to be around. And you're going to probably make some boneheaded decisions in your life that are going to affect your relationships if you're not willing to change.
So how did you personally, Paul, deal with knowing that pretty much with every decision you made that you were going to really disappoint like 50% of the people?
Well,
or less or more.
The quote I always use is, leadership is disappointing people at a rate they can accept. And that was kind of COVID. It's like, okay, I'm going to let you down as slow as possible for this over a period of months.
It's like introducing change to a church.
Yes, yes, very slowly. Yeah. And people will slowly be ticked. But, all kidding aside, I think when you're in a leadership role, you have to realize that you're never going to always get consensus on something. But where you start to become a bit of a stubborn and pig-headed leader is when you fail to have empathy to realize, why do others disagree with me? So it's like, hey, I understand why you disagree. I don't necessarily agree with why you disagree, but I understand. Yeah. I understand why you're upset on this. And I'd ask for the same level of empathy for me, to know that I'm in the situation where if I chose your position, you got to know I'm going to be having this conversation on the other side of the issue. So at some point, and this happened a ton during the pandemic and still happens, six one, half dozen the other, pick a route, and then ask for forgiveness with the other half. And we did that a lot. And so I think after coachability, I think empathy and being an empathetic leader is so important, of being able to understand, why are you so upset about this issue? Is it me? Did you lose your mom to COVID? Or do you have some underlying condition? I mean, why are you so mad about this? Because I don't think you hate me that much. I think there's something else there that I just want to understand. And believe me, it's hard to be empathetic with some people, because they make it really difficult. But as soon as you become too hardened as a leader to have that level of empathy, you really can become callous really, really quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's it's often easier said than done, like you said. But it's maintaining that there's always people behind, the policy, or people behind whatever decision is being made, and how do we enter into their world, knowing that we don't know what's going on in their head. Totally, we like to assume we do, and we'd like to assume that everybody should think like we do. But yet the reality is that they think like they do, and we don't know the story, and we're all products of our past even. Right. So we don't even know. I mean, forget about what's happened over the last 2 years, and that's how big that has been. And I don't think personally we will see the impact of the last couple of years, the true impact, like until way down the line. I mean, I graduated my son finally in the middle of July at Howard Wood Field. In like 100-degree heat,
chairs
they were in black,
spaced out all over
Howard Wood. No prom, no after party, prom party, and all those kinds of things. And he was a teen boy, and so he's like, Dad, it's really not that big of a deal. But you know what? It really was a big deal. Mm-hmm. And so they can say it's not a big deal. It's kind of a rite of passage. Yeah. And our kids that are kindergartners going to school with. My mom was a kindergarten teacher for 25 years. They got plastic shields in between them and going one way down the hallway because that's the way that the virus travels, or whatever, right? We don't know the impact. So, but how do we help to figure out understanding where they're coming from in a personal level?
Right. Right. Today's a great example. I was driving to work, and a dude's walking through my neighborhood. He's walking his dog, and he's got a mask on his face.
Outside.
And he's walking by himself with his dog. And I'm like, okay, wonder what's going on with that guy, that he feels the need to do that. I mean, and instead of saying like, wow, that's weird. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
Instead of casting judgment, I'm like, okay, something's there. He's obviously very nervous still about the pandemic, or he's, almost got into this rhythm where this is just what he does. And so like some of our mental health, and I think we might talk about that in a minute, the mental health challenges that I've seen come out of the last couple of years have been absolutely incredible. And I see in the bowels of the city, the police calls, the calls for service, domestic assaults, things like that a lot of the public doesn't always get to see, and see how mental health has really created this fragility with folks that we were a lot closer than many people thought to cracking. Mm-hmm. And it took the trifecta of COVID, George Floyd, and an increasingly tense political election 2020, the trifecta of just chaos to just crack a lot of folks.
Yeah. It's there's been no shortage of heavy stuff, and I know that one of the big things, like, and you just mentioned, was the new focus on mental health and how do we help. And I know that we've got something coming up here in a couple of weeks with the 437 Project, and to bring awareness to just suicide and how many people we have lost to suicide, which is already, it was already way too many people, but you see the amount of suicides that took place over the last couple of years with all the turmoil. So talk about what we can do, and I think that you just a little bit mentioned or alluded to it in just trying to empathize, and instead of casting judgment, figuring out ways to enter in. But what are some of the things that we're doing here in our city, and then to really help with the mental health crisis that's going on? And then secondly, what the whole 437 Project and the race across South Dakota is attempting to accomplish, and what the purpose is of that? Yeah,
well, behavioral health, addiction, mental health challenges has been a topic that I've been very passionate about since I got into office in 2018. One of the big needs that I see is that we have historically somewhat over-incarcerated people who are dealing with addiction and mental health challenges. And an example I like to use, and I'll use it here, is if we're recording this podcast and a guy gets into this building and walks into this room and he's screaming and yelling and he goes out in the hall and he takes a pee in the hallway and he runs out, we'd call the cops. We're like, we got a crazy dude in here. Just peed in our hallway. I mean, Well, the cops would come, they'd get him, they'd take him to the clink, trespassing, you have all these charges. Is that an incarceration issue? I mean, this guy is losing it. He has some serious mental problems. And so by putting him in a jail cell or giving him a fine or giving him a court date, which he won't show up for, and now he has a bench warrant, and now we got to arrest him, and now he's costing the system hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, when the root cause is that this guy has a mental problem that we got to assess. So we opened a facility, it's 1 year this month, called The Link. The Link is a place where we link people to the right care that they need. So now the cops could come get that dude, and they'd take him to The Link, and they say, okay, what's his problem? Well, he does need to be jailed because he did this, or you know what, he's high on this, he needs detox, he needs to come down, he needs this treatment, needs to be inpatient here, and we link him or her to the right resource. The story I like to tell is we had one guy on his 59th time to the link, he decided to get treatment. So on time 56, cops bring him in there, he shows up. Time 57.
In a year.
1 year. We've only been open a year.
Yeah.
Think what that guy has cost, that facility. But on the 59th time, he's like, I'm done with this, dude. I'm going to get treatment. I'm going to get care. He's now been sober for several months. He's got a full-time job. He's got a place to live. And it took us investing in that dude 59 times. So like, what's a life worth? It's incredibly expensive to run a facility like that. But is that guy made in God's image just like everybody else? Does he have the disease of addiction? Absolutely. So it's those stories that really give me excitement, encouragement for my job, because that's being a people noticer, noticing that guy that no one else would really care about or want to invest in. Those are the people that we need to continue to notice and invest in. So given that and all the mental health and addiction issues I've seen over the last couple of years, decided to raise money and awareness around the topic of mental health and suicide by organizing a run across the entire state of South Dakota, 437 miles. That's why we call it the 437 Project. For those of you who know our state, it started in Belle Fourche, almost over in Wyoming, and finished in Sioux Falls. There's going to be 12 of us. We're going to run relay style. It should take 70 to 80 hours, somewhere in there. And we're raising money and awareness for an organization called the Helpline Center, which deals with mental health and addiction calls. Last year, they took 15,000 mental health calls just in South Dakota. 2,500 of those were crisis calls. And in July, the feds rolled out the 988 number. 988 is the new 911 for mental health. So if you're experiencing suicidal thoughts, behavioral health breakdown, crisis, you call 988. And that connects you with the right resources, because the feds, the FCC, has seen how great this issue is. And in our state, being a very ag and rural state, farmer suicide is an increasing challenge. Speaking with some of the experts in our state at Avera Health and others, they see that more and more. 2020 in Sioux Falls was a record for the number of suicides in Sioux Falls. Just about earlier this spring, I want to say 4 or 5 months ago, a good friend of mine took his own life, and he had shook this entire community.
Yeah, for sure.
And so it's just an issue that I feel called to shed a light on and continue to talk about, raise awareness by whether we run across the state, whether we open something like the Link. It's a topic that just needs continued attention and focus.
So being that the race is in a couple weeks, obviously you've got the 12 that are going to run the race. We don't need people to run the race. By the way, if you would have asked me, I would have said, no, that's my youngest son. That's not me. But we can be involved in other ways. I'm assuming that it's in a couple weeks. Can people still give? Can they still be a part of it in some way?
Yeah, absolutely. The 437project.org has information about who the 12 runners are. They all have different reasons for wanting to do this.
Yeah.
Some have been directly affected by suicide. One guy's a mental health counselor that he can't overstate how heavy the challenges are that he's seen in his office with his schedule and workload around everything from youth mental health to, veteran suicide, which, they're the number one group that takes their own lives. And so the 437project.org is a great place to go, raise funds, support a runner, and just kind of track the journey of what we're going to be doing. There's always critics out there, as we talked about, like, oh, so this is your answer to mental health? You're just going to run across the state? Like, well, no, we're opening places like the Link. We're raising money for the 211 Helpline Center.
Right.
We're getting the entire state to look at this and think about it by running through some really barren parts of the state just to say, hey, this affects all of us. So that's what I'd love for people to do is go check out that website.
Are there different points that people could drive and
Absolutely.
Water stations? And
There's kind of 10 big stops. Belfou, Sturgis, Pierre.
And the maps on the website. And I actually went and read all the bios of the runners, and I know a couple of them, so that was kind of fun outside of yourself, and so that was fun to see that they're participating, and so for sure they're going to want to check that out. Well, we've only just got a little bit more time, Paul, before we got to wrap this episode up. But I know that in a position like yours, it's not just an individual; it's the family. Because it is a lot of hours. It's when your husband or dad is on the TV or has a pretty intense schedule that greatly impacts our families. Business owners all the time, they struggle with, man, how do I achieve balance in my home? I'm trying to run my business, but I'm also trying to be a good husband. I'm trying to be a good dad. I feel like I'm letting someone down, all of that kind of thing. Do you have any, I guess, for lack of better words, advice as to, and this is something I think that as men we often struggle with, is just that whole, like, how do we really care for our family when we're working and doing all those things? Do you have any advice for individuals that are listening, just really struggling with figuring out how to do it all? And they just feel like they're failing at home. Because I'm sure there's been times where you're like, man, I feel like I'm failing at home.
Yeah. 4 times already just today. I will tell you a couple things that I don't want to say transformational because that's an over-exaggerated word, but have been really influential in my life. One is, Tom, I try to get up around 4:30, 4:45 every day and front load my day with stuff for me. Okay. Devotions, fitness, running, workout, quiet time, meditation, so that when the family starts rumbling at 6:30, I've already had almost 2 hours of Paul time in. That way, with the rest of the day, I don't need Paul time. I don't have to be selfish because I've had my time, and that's how I chose to use that time. The trade-off is I go to bed about 10 o'clock, 9:30, 10, because kids are in bed, so there's no one else for me to be with other than my wife. And I'm not discounting that. We spend time together too, but that's our time right before we go to bed. And so I think managing your schedule with when you get up and when you go to sleep is very important. I think the second thing is you have to, in this age where you have so many demands on your time, you have to put concrete walls around certain times in your schedule, and they just cannot be touched. Like, I always am going to bring my kids to school. And my staff knows I got 8 to 9:30 a.m. is what we call green zone time. Green zone time is when Carrie Newhoff write a book, At Your Best. And green zone is when I'm at my best. And 8 to 9:30, I can conquer the world. I'm mentally sharp. I've had my coffee. My kids are at school. I've worked out already. I can crush it. And then my yellow zone is, maybe 10 to 2, and then 2 to 5. I'm kind of in that red zone where it's like, okay, crank out some emails, do some kind of meetings, so that green zone time is so important. So what's your green zone? When are you at your best? It's foolish to think you can be awesome 10 hours a day and you're always on. When are you on? And who do you give that time to when you're on? For me, it's 6 to 11 a.m. So I use some of that time for me. I always bring my kids to school, even though one of them can drive and the other one they could ride with. I still bring them every day. We get a donut at Holiday gas station by my house every single day because that is our time, man.
Yeah.
And so putting those concrete walls around those certain special times with your family, and don't let anybody steal that from you and put any other time over it. And the last thing is you have to spend time in the Word every day. You have to find time for Scripture. The Bible app has been a game changer for me. I got the Bible and the Word of the Lord with me wherever I go. Yep. And even if it's just reading a quick plan, getting a notification of the verse of the day, sharing the verse with some buddies, it's been a game changer. And I think those three things are really, really influential.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I mean, especially like blocking out those times in your calendar, and then the power of your Word. I shouldn't say I would not be able to. I have not ventured into the getting up at 4:30 time frame yet, but that is it. I will receive that as a challenge and encouragement to me to figure out, okay, like how do I get that time?
I would say this,
that's good though.
Your green zone is different than mine. My green zone is 5, 6 a.m. to 11. Yours may be 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. It's maybe when you're on, and so it's everyone's different.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think back when I was in seminary, it's working, family, kids were young and all this kind of stuff. My best time to write papers was like 11 p.m. until 2 a.m. Because everybody was asleep. That's when creativity was flowing in my head. I still write messages that. So, I mean, that's a great point. I think a lot of times and I just did it. I compared myself to you, and we live in a world of comparisons. Let's be honest, right? We see people's highlight reels on social media. We begin to say, "Oh, they must be a better dad than me. They must be a better husband. They must be a more successful, business guy, entrepreneur, whatever." And that's our temptation. But we are all wired differently, so I think that it's important to lean into that and figure out what is my green zone. So that's a good reminder. So that was good for me. I appreciate that. I learned something. That's good. I love that. Specific ways. Here's I think that maybe I know that you're prayed for. That you have a lot of people, myself included, that will just text you randomly at times, say, "Hey, just praying for you today," whatever. But what are some specific ways, Paul, that the people of Sioux Falls that are around the country that maybe have just been kind of enjoying this conversation here can be praying for you and your family?
Ooh, great question. First and foremost, I'm kind of going to throw back because I hate asking people to pray for me. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw this back and say, here are specific things I think you can do, whether you're in Sioux Falls or not, to help our country and help your communities. Two things. One is, if you're listening to this show right now and you have a heartbeat, you are qualified to be a mentor. And we need mentors in this community. Yep. I mentioned to you off air, we got a 1-month-old at our house right now that we're taking care of and fostering. And a lot of people are like, well, I don't have time, and maybe someday I'd like to do that. Well, dude, our house is bonkers right now. And we got a 1-month-old, and it's as big of a train wreck as you think it would be. But that mom needed that break. And it's through a Christian organization. The mom's going through some short-term crisis. We need mentors in our community, whether it's ex-felons coming out of jail, whether it's immigrants in your community, whether it's kids who don't have a dad, whether it's a baby that needs a home. Second thing is, very specific, you got to cut back on divisive rhetoric on social media. Social media is dividing our country. Misinformation on social media is dividing our country. I built a whole company around social media in 2008. My first client, we built a MySpace page for a Senate candidate. I mean, I was on the bleeding edge of that. And I've seen what social media has done to people's minds, their mental health, their psyche. I've seen it break families apart, relationships apart, marriages. Social media is a great tool, but the devil loves it. The devil uses it to divide and fracture. And so just like you don't eat Doritos and ice cream all day, you don't consume social media all day, because that's tarnishing your mind just like junk food tarnishes your body, and you got to be careful about that. So go mentor someone and monitor your intake of what you're doing online, because it does affect your mental health.
Yeah, I'm glad that you did bring in the mentorship component, because I was going to go there next with the, specifically for the Sioux Falls area, we have Sioux 52, and the desire that we have to have, especially men. I mean, we need men mentors to be in like the elementary schools and to be in the Sioux Falls public school systems. I was one of those kids that just needed other dudes in my life to help me know the way, and so the need is great. The harvest is plentiful, as the scripture would say, and the workers are few.
And men specifically, we have slowly been demasculated. What's the word I'm looking for? Demasculine?
Yeah, that thing. Yeah,
that word. Demasculated. We need men to be men, okay? We need to step up and say, hey, you need a guy in your life. This kid needs a father figure. This dad needs to be engaged here, and we need more men to step up and be leaders in the community, leaders in their home. It's why your RESGEN work, I just love it because men need to continue to not shy away from the fact that, hey, I'm a man and I'm a warrior for the Lord and I'm tough and I'm going to, do everything I can to defend my family's honor and do good work at, my employer and so forth. So, men, if you're listening, you need to step up and answer that call in your community and use the gifts you've been given to serve others.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I know that you deflect that, so we're still all going to pray for you and your family. You don't have to give us specifics. We'll just pray in general for you and your family. But that's a good charge, encouragement. Sometimes I feel like we're always saying challenge, and we've been challenged so much. But that's a good encouragement, kind of a charge to us, saying, okay, like how can we utilize our life to the benefit of other people? And I think that the role of mentorship, we're actually going to be talking probably a little bit more about that this year at the RESGEN Men's Summit, which we're gonna end our time here by allowing you to kind of give a final word like we end all our times. But I do want to say also here on air that it's always been such a great encouragement to me personally that you've come to the RESGEN Men's Summit, that you've kicked it off several times with a word of encouragement for the guys to just be there, to be fully there, and then praying over the day, and so I know that, when you stand up before roughly 1,000 men and share that with them, I know it's super meaningful to them that you do. It's very meaningful to me. So I'm
honored to do it, man. It's honestly a tremendous honor to be able to as a mayor stand up and pray to my Lord and pray, over the men in that room to just, hey, let everything go. Be here now. Be present. Let the words wash over you that the speakers are going to share with you, because we are not good at investing in ourselves and we're not good at being vulnerable with other guys.
Yeah.
We all got to look like we got it together, this macho facade.
Yeah.
And RESGEN Summit is that one time a year when we can kind of let our guard down and say, hey, we're all struggling with some of the same stuff. We can all be vulnerable together.
Yeah.
We're all in this fight together.
Yeah, we're all on the journey. Well, brother, this has been super good, super fun. I can't thank you enough for coming and spending some time kicking off season 3 with me here at the Giving Life podcast. And our hope is that this is a platform, a show that where men whose life in Christ gives life to others. And so, thanks for sharing some space with me and talking with dudes about how they can give life in their worlds, the way that you try to give life in the world that God allows you to operate in. And we end our show every episode with something we just call the final word. Okay, 60 to 90 seconds or shorter if necessary, whatever, of just a final shot of encouragement, a final word for listeners, whatever the Lord's laying on your heart.
Well, I think the thing we talked about, and I haven't talked about Randy in a long time, is that being a people noticer piece. And I think now more than ever, our society and our community needs that. There are a lot of hurting people in this world right now. And I'm sure people are saying, well, no duh. But I can tell you, man, as I sit in my chair and the emails I get and the information I get from different departments about what's going on in their community, there's a lot of people struggling. And we as Christian men and Christian women, but I know a lot of your audience is men, are called to go out there and make a difference in our communities and use the talents God has given us, whether it's putting a podcast together, whether it's taking a 1-month-old in, whether it's teaching woodworking to a young person who's 8 or 9 who doesn't have a dad in their life. You all have time. You think you don't have time, we have time. We may not all have money to give philanthropy, but we all got the same 24 hours to give with our time. So look for ways in your community. I can guarantee you there's a bunch of organizations that would love guys just like you to put your hand up and say, I want to make a difference in my community, help someone. Think if our entire country would all give an hour a week, 2 hours a week to help someone else. Unbelievable. Right. It gives me chills to think what could happen to our nation if we had that philosophy and that mentality. So go out, serve. It's what the Lord calls us to do and what we're to do as men in this kingdom.
All right. Well, Paul, thank you so much for serving our city. Thanks for being here on the podcast. Remember, listeners, go to 437project.org.
The
437 project.org. Find out more about that, ways that you can be a part of that. And thanks so much for being here, Ron.
Thanks, Tom.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Paul TenHaken today. As always, if you found this episode helpful, I'd encourage you to share it with others that may find it helpful as well. I would also be super grateful if you would just take 30 seconds to rate and review the podcast. This is a huge help as we continue to grow our audience and our impact. If you'd like to connect more with the mayor, you can do so through his social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And be sure to visit siouxfalls.org to find out more about everything that's happening in our great city. Thanks again for joining me today, everybody. We'll see you next time for another episode of the RESGEN Giving Life Podcast. Until then, continue being men whose life in Christ gives life to others.